Hello, Flawless family. We are back with Gregory Patterson, and we are thrilled to be interviewing him once again. We first saw Gregory Patterson on our Instagram Live. Gregory is somebody that's inspiring. He's an advocate. He's a beauty and grooming expert, a celebrity stylist, an Instagram influencer, a Project Runway alum, and just honestly a super bright light in this world. I'm glad to now call Gregory a colleague and a friend, and just appreciate that you're here with us today, Gregory.
No, thank you. I'm so grateful to be doing this and obviously talking about like mental health and all the things we need to be talking about. So it's an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. We're definitely glad to have you here again. And so, dive into the questions. Things are looking a little bit better, but still, there's been so many effects of the COVID-19 crisis. So I want to ask you again, just what has been the most challenging aspect of the crisis for you, and what's been your silver lining?
Wow. I mean, I think I'm a Libra. I don't know what that really has to do with anything in astrological signs, but I think I'm very, very sensitive, and I'm very sensitive to not only what's going on around me, but like what's happening in other people's lives. So just simply seeing how many people are affected by this and, either displaced or put out of jobs or family members that have lost loved ones, it's incredibly heartbreaking. And for me personally, when I receive all this information day after day on the news, it really starts to take its effect on me. I live in Jackson Heights, Queens, so I'm in the epicenter. Elmhurst Hospital is about 2 blocks away from me. And Trey, when I tell you, like in the beginning of this, the sirens, New York has a lot of sirens. We have cabs, we have buses. I'm on the 5th floor. I'm right on a bus line, so I always hear the bus going 24 hours. But to hear sirens going on for 24 hours and to hear helicopters going for 24 hours and to walk out of my building and, see the refrigeration trucks lined up, in the beginning, I thought I had, I guess, enough tools in my box to be able to navigate through that. But I don't think a pandemic at this scale, anybody's, especially myself, has been equipped. Even the tools that I do have in my box haven't been able to kind of carry me through. And so I think just the sensitivity during this pandemic, it's really starting to have its toll on me. Those sirens 24 hours a day, you can't really sleep. So my sleep's been disturbed, and I've just been kind of all around and just looking for ways that, my positivity in life and my choice of a positive attitude is in life, even given my personal circumstances. The silver lining for me is I do have the strength of positivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a gift that I've been trying to share with, my Instagram following and anybody that I engage with on the street, or, now my local Starbucks is opened up again, so we can do mobile ordering. So when I go in, I make sure to just like hoot and holler and say thank you and just really try to like raise the level of attitude and, spirit during this circumstance. So for me, the silver lining is, I guess, sharing my gifts of choice of positivity in an unfortunate circumstance. I really see that that's where some of my talents can lend to uplifting some spirits, even my own, during this time.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Like you live at the epicenter of this, like New York City. I know for a long time, I'm not sure if it still does, but for a long time, had the largest cases by far in the country.
Yeah.
You're right smack in the middle of it, but
I'm 2 blocks away.
two blocks away from where
Away.
everything went down, and that I can't imagine what it's like going through that. But you still manage to be this positive light, uplifting yourself, uplifting others. So I gotta know, what are you doing to maintain, positive mental health during this time?
It's so weird because I can't just answer that question and like pop off as though it's come out of nowhere, right? I'm instantly gonna go back to my childhood, like I'm and I'm gonna get really serious and real honest with you, as I have with you in the past. I'm a victim and survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I came out at the age of 13 as openly gay in a very, very small rural town, and really had to battle every single day. And then when I went home, I had to battle my parents, you know, answering questions at the age of 13 that no child should be able to have to answer to an adult. And I found, whether it's good or bad, in that situation, in those circumstances, I have found a survival skill of switching into positivity. Because what I learned early on was, though my circumstances may be out of my control, my attitude and choice within them, to an extent, I feel I have a certain amount of control. And to be honest, Trey, it was really sometimes the only thing that I could control, was how I engaged around my friends and interacted. Now, you know, 38 years of age now, and I see a therapist twice a week and I see a psychiatrist once a month. You know, they may say that that's just a coping skill and a survival skill to get through that level of trauma, perhaps. But it's also one of my character traits that I really, really love. You know, I am able to bring that light of positivity and switch into a mindset of choosing happiness. Even in the darkest of circumstances, there is gratitude in there. You know, even in the darkest of my circumstances, I can be super hatred and super, super angry, but that doesn't feed my soul. You know, that doesn't help me grow. When I've stayed in anger and when I've stayed in that level of sadness and pain, I stayed stuck, and I stayed in addiction, and I stayed in blame, and I wasn't able to do any soul growing through that. So what I'm doing now, and it's so crazy, is, you know, I woke up like day number 2 of this pandemic, sitting on the couch, and I'm like, okay, you're not going to sit here on the couch and Netflix and chill for however long we're going to be in this. Like, you're going to use this time wisely, because as a freelance hairdresser who's always on television, travels the world, works with celebrity, all this stuff, I wanted a break. I wanted a break to do other things. I wanted to read more books. I wanted to paint my apartment. I wanted to get some images in my house framed. I wanted to clean out my cabinets, you know? So what I did on day 2 is I took a piece of paper and I drew a line straight down the middle. And I put personal and professional. And I set a timer for 1.5 minutes for each column. So I was able to spend 1.5 minutes listing anything that came to my mind on my personal goal list. And then once that 1.5 minutes was over, done, I switched over to personal and I hit go on my timer. And these could have been things like finish baseboards, mail Christmas gifts, my Mother's Day gift, because I was stuck in an addiction forever, you know, for 4 years. I have 3 Mother's Day gifts that never made it to her. And every time I look at them, the shame just builds on the fact that I wasn't able to send those. So I sent these things. So I committed to knocking off one goal from my personal list and my professional list every day. And anything I do on top of that is amazing, like awesome for me. And if I don't do any more than that, that's okay. As long as I committed to doing one goal personally and one goal professionally. And I've been able to do it, which is so insane for me. It sounds so ridiculous and simple and maybe small, but for, you know, a recovering addict, for somebody with severe depression and anxiety, the simplest of tasks for me are often the most daunting, and they seem like a Mount Everest that I'll never be able to get to the top of.
And you've been through so much, and that's why I've said you're so courageous. But like you said, you were at a very tough point at 13 years of age, and now it's 25 years later that you're really starting to, like, to me, it seems like master this. I mean, I know you take it day by day, step by step, but everything I'm seeing, I'm just like in awe. So what advice would you have for 13-year-old you, or, someone that might be at that beginning stage? What would you, and if you're having a conversation with that person, what would you say to that person?
Wow. You know, it's interesting. On my Instagram, I posted this image of me doing a back bend in my front yard, and it's a day that I will never forget. I was younger than 13, and I remember I like Kylie Minogue's Locomotion just came out, that song, and I was obsessed with the song. It had a beat that I had never heard before. It had this hook that just caught me, like caught my soul, right? And I grew up like country. I grew up, team roping, hunting, fishing. I grew up playing baseball my whole life. I grew up playing soccer my whole life. And I loved athletics and being outside and being outdoorsy and riding horses and three-wheelers and things like that. And I also loved gymnastics, and I also loved dance, and I also loved, beauty and fashion with my neighbor girlfriends, but I didn't know what any of this meant. And I also didn't know that an interest in all of that was wrong. Growing up, I was told that who I am and the things that I just organically and innately love, I never knew that being gay was wrong until my dad told me that I'm, a disgusting human being. And it's the worst thing that you could ever tell your parents. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with me until my peers at school repeatedly used the F word in such a derogatory way that I felt shame about who I knew that I was. And I didn't even, to be honest with you, I didn't even know what the word was for how I felt until sixth grade sex education. And my PE teacher said this word homosexual, and he gave the definition that it's when two men or two women, two of the same sex, love each other. And I'm like, wow, that's me. Like, there's a word for me. And so if I could go back and look, when I look at that photo now, I don't see anything wrong with that kid. Mm-hmm. And I don't see anything broken with little Greg. And in fact, what I see is a human being who is freely expressing without boundaries, without limits, without having to explain who they are and why they are. I was so free at 13. And it wasn't until everybody else told me who I am wasn't good for them. So if you're 13 years old, 12 years old, 16 years old, 26 years old, nobody's opinion about you matters. Nobody's label of what they need to fit you in so that they are comfortable matters. The only thing that matters, and I know if you're listening to this, it may seem super tough if you're going through this situation right now, and if you are feeling a level of shame because you may feel that you might have been born in the wrong body, or you're a black man, a black boy growing up today in today's culture, you might feel a level of shame attached to that and fear attached to that. And I have to tell you, there isn't one thing wrong with you. The thing that's wrong is the way that people label you. That's what's wrong. And that will shift and change with people like me and people like you, Trey, going to fight and battle for you today. Like that 13-year-old Greg, I'm doing everything in my power today to make sure another little boy or girl who's black or brown or gay or trans or, a heterosexual boy that loves to wear pink, it doesn't matter. You are perfectly perfect as you are. Nothing is wrong with you.
That's amazing. There's so many quotable phrases and everything that you just said. And I also love how you brought up the concept of shame, because here at Flawless, one of our, top, prerogatives, if not the top one, is really just changing the way that people view mental health and ending the discrimination towards mental health. And that's why I really want to dive into your experience that you shared with us last time with substance use and kind of everything you went through, because that's another area of challenges where people are often brought into shame and whatnot. So I would love for you to talk more about your experience and how you got through it.
Absolutely. And I would love to. And it's interesting because, you were the first person last week that I even talked about this in a public forum.
That's
And I was
awesome.
so nervous. I remember I was shaking because I've never navigated these waters before, talking about, my addiction and recovery publicly. I've kept it in my family and a close group of friends just because I I didn't know how to navigate it. And the more I release my shame, the more free I feel, and the more days I get in sobriety. And that's why it's really, really important for me to lend and offer my voice for those of you that are still struggling. But I have to back it. I have to back that shame up, because if I look at where that shame started, at the age of 8 during my childhood sexual abuse. And I was abused for 5 years by my cousin, a family member. And there was always this feeling of, like not right, and this feeling of hiding something, and just carrying around that simple secret of something that you question isn't right, for me, started to develop this seed of shame. The seed, I feel, was planted during that experience. And then fast forward to the age of 13, I came out of the closet. When I came out of the closet, I remember, I was mowing the lawn, and my dad and I started to get in this argument. He's like, tell me right now, are you a faggot? Just yelling in my face. And I could feel that I was about to tell him. And I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, you know what, Dad? Yes, and I used the same word. And he just started crying and ran to his bedroom and hid in his bedroom all night, just sobbing. And I'd never seen my dad cry before. And it was interesting to me, because here I'm the one that's being called out for being gay. And why do I feel so heartbroken that I made my dad cry? So that added another level of shame to this. And then I went to school and was called, a faggot every day of my life, and had to physically fist fight my way through school. And that added more shame to that. And when I told my mom the following day that I was gay, she said, no, you're not. Something happened to you. So then what I had to do was not only hide the fact that I was sexually molested by a family member, because I didn't want to get them in trouble, but now I'm having to swallow that pill and hide it, and try to explain to my mother at the age of 13 that I am gay just because I'm gay. And how do I discern between I am gay because versus I am gay and I was molested? You know what I mean? So it was really challenging for me to navigate. So I became really, really good at keeping secrets. And fast forward later in life, I started to develop panic attacks. When I was in my 20s, I remember during the movie Seabiscuit, I had a panic attack. I had no idea what it was. I ran out into the lobby, asked them to call 911, said I was having a heart attack. The fire department ambulance showed up, and they're like, you're having a panic attack. Are you on drugs? And I said, no, I'm not on drugs, but my heart's about to stop. I can't breathe. Somebody help me. And they said, this is a panic attack. So the level of shame, I've learned that the body keeps score and always wins. And every time I was, adding to my shame bucket, my body was keeping score until the day it could no longer hold this level of shame. But I wasn't able to recognize that then, Trey. And what happened was I started going on with my life, and I continued to push this down. And what happened was, as I pushed my anxiety and my panic down, my depression grew, my isolation grew. So fast forward to me moving to New York, I was in a relationship. I was in a long distance relationship. And, the relationship started to grow into like, well, how do I know you're not out in bars and all this stuff? So I stayed home and did what I thought should be the right thing to do, and really isolated. Well, what happened during that was, as I isolated, my drinking elevated. So then the relationship ended, and I found myself going out a lot more to the bars because I didn't have any friends. I sacrificed going out and all my friends for the sake of a relationship to try to keep that together. And one night I ended up going home with somebody, and they pulled out what I thought was a marijuana pipe, and it happened to be crystal meth. And I had never smoked crystal meth before in my life. And the decision of blackout drinking now tipped over into using crystal meth for the first time. And I can't say that I was addicted to initially the feeling of the drug, but I can say that I felt like somebody was giving me time, and somebody was giving me attention, and somebody was giving me a space to be in, which was so weird because my use wasn't it was so odd. I would like use to spend time with people, and when I think about that out loud, it's really, really sad, but that's where I was, and that's how low my depression was, and how deep my anxiety was, and how deeply rooted my shame is. And I found myself every time I would go out, blackout drunk, back to this gentleman's house, blackout drunk, back to this gentleman's house. It became a cycle tray that I found myself in for about 4 years. And, you know, the shame of it kept me in there, because in the gay community, you know, you're damned if you do if you use crystal meth, right? You all of a sudden become part of that group that uses crystal meth. And then I went to treatment, and I, you know, went to Breathe in West Hollywood, California, one of the best treatment centers in the world for crystal meth addiction. And I literally was able to breathe again, and I was able to stop and surround myself with other gay men who found themselves not knowing how they got there. You know, the stigma attached to crystal meth is like you're a junkie and you're so gross, and you know, you're the face that they show you of, you know, here's 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. And I could never relate to that face in my addiction trade, because I have all my teeth. I didn't lose my career. You know, I still can show up and look like this. And I really wish that in the face of crystal meth, this is the face of crystal meth. This is, I am an addict, and I was stuck in an addiction for 4 years that I couldn't get out of because of the level of deep-rooted shame. And now the work that I'm doing through talking with you, talking with other members in my community, and talking with my therapist, talking with my family, having conversations that are so hard to have. My mom and I, after our conversation last week, got into another disagreement because I'm no longer allowing my shame to be brushed under the rug. And if it's uncomfortable for you to talk about, I will take a pause on the conversation. But guaranteed, when we talk again, we are picking up from where we left off, because my shame almost killed me. I was almost murdered 2 years ago in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because my shame grew to an addiction. My addiction grew to the need to be needed by somebody. And I found myself paralyzed on somebody's floor for a day and a half, almost being murdered and dismembered.
And your story, like I said, is just so powerful to just visualize and think about all the things that you've gone through. And when I kind of try to put together this timeline, you know, it's bewildering. It's amazing that in this timeline are stories of success where we have the Empire Beauty School, we have the famous, renowned Project Runway. You know, how did you balance that? I know you talked about how you weren't the face of addiction. You weren't that guy with no teeth or that's homeless or whatever. Like, you know, you looked like a person that was just living their life. You know, how did you balance it, and the toll that must have took on for you to be kind of living, you know, this double life?
Yeah, so that's another thing is you know, when I started working with my therapist and my clinical director at Breathe, and more specifically my personal therapist at Breathe, her name is Mel, and she is one of my Earth's angels. she was like, you know, what are your goals in sobriety? Like, what are your recovery goals? And I thought about it, and I thought, you know, I have 3 goals, Trey. I want peace, I want freedom, and I want a return back to loving me. I want to return back to loving that 13-year-old boy doing it back then that knew nothing was wrong with him back then, right? So the second piece to this, or the first 2 pieces, peace and freedom, trying to maintain this level of success and show up to be successful and to show up and do my job and to show up and share my gifts. What that came with was a bunch of lies. This meant that whenever I would be at a blogger event, whenever I would be, you know, in a group of people, you know, at a dinner party, at a dinner meeting party, this meant that I had to position myself in a position where I constantly had to navigate the conversation, because I can only let you in so far, because you may discover my truth. Mm-hmm. So what that meant, what that looked like for me was, oh, I got to go to bed early. I have to wake up tomorrow, which was true. That was true. But what I really meant to say was, I am so exhausted from the day of navigating my truth in this conversation. I'm so exhausted. I have to go to sleep. I can no longer do this, because you're hanging on to every word that anybody asks you, you know, like, oh, what do you do in New York for fun? I cannot answer that question to you, because I'm not having fun in New York, because I'm stuck in a crystal meth addiction. And what my time at home and my free time looks like for me means I am going to the same place to eat every Friday night. Why? Because they know the level at which I can drink margaritas, and they keep them coming without judgment. So I go to that place every single Friday night because they know my routine, and we call it a routine now. And then I go to the bar right next door to that because I can hide in the corner, because it's a live singing New York City bar, and I don't have to talk to you, because I can sit in my corner and continue to drink beverages, and I could shush you because, oh, somebody's about to sing live and I don't want to disrespect them. Mm-hmm. I can continue to hide my lies from you in the corner of this bar. And then I'm never agreeing to talk to anybody or meet up with anybody, because I know in about 10 minutes, when I pass my threshold and black out, I will be in a cab going through my list of people that I could use crystal meth with, sending one-off texts, hoping for the first one to bite is, you know, 10 blocks away so I can go over there. So I can't let you know what I do for fun in New York City, because number one, I'm not having fun. Number two, I'm struggling in addiction and I need help and I don't know how to ask for it. And number three, if I ask for it, I feel so ashamed that you are going to label me as a crystal meth user, and you're going to throw me out to the side of the street and label me a crystal meth user and take me out of your options of being a friend or having a friendship or developing a friendship with me. So I'm going to isolate, and I'm going to sit home, and I'm going to get lost in my addiction. I'm going to remove myself from family events, saying I can't make it. You know, my best friend's dad, my best friend since third grade, Trey, her dad died of brain cancer. Horrible brain cancer, happened quickly. This is my best friend of, you know, since third grade. I couldn't make it to her dad's funeral because I was high on crystal meth, because the anxiety of even going to the funeral was so much for me. I needed to find reprieve from that. And so I wasn't able to support her and be with her. And having her sit on my couch helped me get to rehab. She flew from Dallas, Texas, when I was in psychosis in Milwaukee, and was sitting on my couch to help me get help and to share with her the reasons, the truth, the honesty of why I couldn't make it to her dad's funeral, and watch her heart break in front of me. it was freeing for me because I was for the first time being honest. And as hurtful as that was, the shame started to release. The pain started to release. The freedom started to arrive. And this weight of bricks that I've been carrying around for years started to feel like one brick was coming out and another brick was coming out. And I will say the more shame you release, the more bricks you release, the lighter you feel and the freer you are, and the more honest you become, and the more alive I am. You know, I feel more alive today. I feel more at peace today. I feel more free today. And I'm not afraid of my truth. I don't have to fight and navigate conversations and fight wondering if I'm going to be able to make the airplane so that I can make it to the job to show up on TV. I don't have to do that anymore. You know, in recovery, they say like the war is over. And when I was first getting sober, I never really understood that. And now I get it. Like the war, the battle of that everyday fight is over. And that's such a gift, you know?
That's just, you know, amazing. Like every time I hear another aspect of your story, I'm just amazed at, you know, what you've been through, you know, where you're going, where you are right now. Like like everything that you're saying is just like, it's just truly inspiring. And that's why I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I believe your storytelling is going to be a beacon of light for somebody who may be going through something similar, or anything, just going through a tough experience, because, you know, you're kind of, you're showing us where you've been and you're showing us where you're going. And that's why I want to learn more about, you know, what Gregory is doing today in terms of your self-care, starting with, what is your daily morning routine? How do you start your day to have a positive full day, you know?
Well, it's really funny because, I mean, so right when I got out of treatment, I came back to New York, you know, against their advisement of living in a sober home, you know, because the recommendation was, we really want you to build a sober network in a group. And, you know, I live in New York and I love it here and I feel alive here and I'm inspired by New York City. And I know that I can be sober in New York City. You know, I used all over the world. I used in Cape Town, South Africa, in you know, everywhere pretty much I've been, I've used drugs. So for me, my goal is to be sober globally, all over the place, right? So I needed to establish and develop a routine that's going to work for me no matter where I go. And right after I got out of treatment, I was able to hire a sober coach from Mountainside Recovery here in Connecticut and New York. And my coach, this gentleman by the name of Bill, was just so dang incredible and so instrumental in helping me establish a morning routine. And here's what my morning routine looked like. So every day, and I've done this for years, I've kept a gratitude journal, a gratitude list. My mom and I, we've done this since I was young, and it's just something that I've always just absolutely loved, and I've stuck to it. But something that I worked on with Bill was the first thing every morning, I would send him 5 things I'm grateful for first thing in the morning. And at the end of the day, I would send him 5 things that I was grateful for at the end of the day. And I would write these out on my notes and I would text them to him. And Trey, it's so crazy when I flip through my notes and I go through months and months and months. They could be books of everything that I'm grateful for. And when I look back and read those things, the simplest of things that it forces you to be aware of things, the goodness in people, the smiles in others, how radiant flowers are. Right now in quarantine, day number 2, the day that I made the list, I started flipping this little calendar. And I don't know why I started doing this. This little calendar was something that my grandparents had on their desk growing up. And a few years, I was always fascinated by it. It's this little brass calendar, and you flip it and the calendar switches. I was fascinated with it as a child. A few years ago, I found one at an antique store in upstate New York, and I was like, wow, this is insane. This is my childhood. Like, oh my God. And I never like consistently flipped it. And I thought, like, why the hell do I have this thing if I'm not using it, right? So day number 2 in quarantine, I started flipping it and attaching music to it. And then I thought, aha, if I'm not able to get to AA meetings, CMA meetings, if I'm not able to get to my sober network, my friend network, I'm going to need some sort of level of accountability while I'm in quarantine. Because if I know me, I get bored AF real quick. And my bored translates into like, oh shit, what should I do? And then all of a sudden I'm using crystal meth. And I'm like, how did that happen, right? So if I started flipping this calendar consistently so that people were aware that I was doing it and maybe commented that they enjoyed it or didn't, I noticed that people noticed. So I committed to doing this every single day, knowing for myself that if I didn't show up the next day, I may have relapsed. I may not have followed through with my commitment. So it's been a fun, creative commitment to myself to add that extra level of accountability. And I've absolutely loved doing it. And yeah, that's something that I've done. And I continue with my gratitude list. And I do my other things, my other tools that I've learned at Breathe. I meditate every single day, even if it's a sleep meditation. There's a girl on Insight Timer, this woman that she does these 12-minute meditations, and they're vocal and they just speak to the center of my heart and they jumpstart my day. So it allows me to instantly take time for myself first. And then the minute my feet hit the ground, it's positivity. You know, even today, like all of this stuff that's happening in this very moment today, I'm still choosing to be positive given the circumstances I'm in, because my positivity is going to lend to the healing of what's needed in today's environment and culture.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what I really love about that is even when holding yourself accountable, I feel like you do an amazing job of just being self-forgiving and self-accepting. And I think you just really embody that. And that's something that's very tough for a lot of people to do.
Well, and I'm to be honest, well, thank you for recognizing that. But I have to say that's my biggest struggle, Trey, right now. That's my biggest struggle because I have relapsed since recovery. You know, when I was in treatment, I kept hearing all the time, you know, relapse is part of recovery. Relapse is part of recovery. And for me, when I heard that back then, that meant you failed. That meant that $30,000, $60,000 a month, $90,000 was for nothing, and that you failed. And I remember that being such a level of pressure that I didn't feel. If I couldn't even make it every other weekend, how in the hell am I going to make it 30 days? Like, this is an impossible task. This is something that, given my track record for the last 4 years, is impossible. How am I going to do this? So what happened was let's say I got 6 months for the first time. And there's something that happened to my brain at 6 months of healing that I thought, did I want to quit on my own? Or did I quit? Did I get sober because I got caught? And this tickle enters your mind that you think that you question, do you want to be sober? And if I do relapse again, you start to question, will I be able to come back and show up like they say? Like, if you relapse, it's okay, show up the next day. Just get back in the program. Just come back the next day. Start your 90 and 90 again. I started to question if I had the strength to utilize all of these new tools and skills. So I relapsed. And the level of shame that attached to that was so much that I couldn't get out of that headspace. And I found another 4 months and I relapsed again. Let me tell you, my greatest lesson after my last relapse. After my last relapse, I thought to myself, oh my God, you extend so much grace to so many other people. Why are you unwilling to extend some grace to yourself, Greg? You're an addict and you're on the road to recovery. Nobody told you in treatment that you're going to come here and we're going to fix you. And when these gates open up, you're good. What we told you in treatment was, we're going to give you the tools so you can come back if this happens again. And so what I learned after my last relapse was, wow, I went from using every other weekend, crystal meth every other weekend for 4 years. I've used 3 times in 2 years. What progress, not perfection, what progress that is, Greg. Think of how many more times you stayed alive over the last 2 years. Think of all the other ways you were able to grow and heal in the last 2 years. Wow, you're making progress, Greg. It's not perfection. My perfectionism is what has brought me to anxiety, to depression, of doing it right for everybody else. My progress is perfect for me. I am sober today. I am happy today. And I hope I don't relapse again, but I am a human being. And I know that if I do happen to relapse again, there's going to be so much insight and takeaway in that relapse for me. And I'm going to offer myself some grace. And I'm going to know that I'm going to be stronger and have more tools and greater commitment underneath that relapse. And I'm not a piece of shit because it happened.
And there's some terms there that I really want to like touch on. And you talked about perfection, because here at Falls, we believe in seeing the perfection in everyone. And I think you see that the same way, but you have a really good way of calling it grace and finding that grace for yourself, you know? So, and I love hearing that. So we kind of touched on it on an individual level. So my final question for you is, how do we get that bigger? How do we touch society? How do we, get to a flawless world, as we like to call it?
I think it really starts with the individual, Trey. Like for myself, and I'm going to say this out loud because this is my truth. I grew up in a family hearing racial slurs. I grew up in a family hearing derogatory words, faggot, used towards somebody like myself. I grew up in a family using words that are poisonous and toxic towards communities and neighbors and friends or family members. And I don't accept that to be okay in my adult life. And the only way that that becomes not okay in my adult life is I have to actively and consciously choose to remove any bit of that anger and language and attachment or grouping. I have to extract it from my life and commit to never ever using it. Okay. And then I have to extend grace to my dad, to my mom, to my family members, because if I don't extend any grace, my anger grows. My resentment towards them grows. That only affects me, because the more angry I am, the more isolated I become. The more pissed off I am that you use that word, the more angry I become and the more I isolate. And for me, isolation equals addiction. Okay? So I'm also going to extend that grace to myself. When I make a mistake, when I have a lesson in life that I'm able to learn from, I'm going to accept responsibility for it. I'm going to take accountability for it. I'm going to learn everything that I can about it and how I can move forward in the right direction, make the amends when I need to make the amends, but offer myself some grace, knowing I'm not a perfect human being. I'm perfectly imperfect. I am able to make learning lessons so I can grow forward. There are no mistakes in my life today. There are opportunities for me to do a little bit better next time. And if I continue to chip away at that personally and stand up for what I believe in is right, and the things I don't yet know I need to stand up for, then I think collectively, if we all think of it as like linking of like holding hands, and now 2 of us are holding hands and 3 more of us that are extending grace can hold more hands, I think it's a better world of offering a space of grace and kindness and love and compassion for everybody else.
Greg, that's perfectly said, and what a perfect way to end our conversation. Again, I appreciate everything that you had to say. Like, this is going to touch a lot of people, rightfully so. You know, your story needs to be out there because this is what's going to help change everything that, you know, we're trying to do here. So I really appreciate you getting vulnerable with us, getting open with us, and having this conversation. We're going to make sure that we have your Twitter and Instagram edited in here so people can follow you and follow your journey.
Thank you.
But Greg, again, I just want to thank you for finding the time to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm so grateful that you guys even like trust me to tell my story and share it. And I also just want to say that if anybody is out there watching this right now and you don't have the strength or you don't have the courage or you've lost all hope and think that it's gone, I know exactly where you're at. I remember praying to the moon at night, hoping and praying to God somebody would come and save me. And it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you've got to extend yourself and raise your hand and say, I need help. Please reach out to me. Hit me in my DMs on Instagram. My email is on my Instagram. Email me if you need help and are struggling. I will do whatever I can with the resources I have to get you the help that 4 angels scooped up and helped me get.
Thank you for being open to being a resource for so many people that are going to need it.
Of course. We all need it. We all need it.
Definitely.
Trey, I love you, man.
Listen, it's all love over here, Greg. It's all love over here.
And tell the team at Flawless, give them a big old hug for me.
I definitely will. I got you, Greg. Don't worry.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye-bye.